What if the thing you spend your whole life chasing didn't exist for most of human history? You're about to find out, and it might change how you see everything. You probably think money is ancient, like caveman ancient. You think it's always been here, like gravity or taxes. But here's the truth. Money as we know it is roughly 5,000 years old. Modern humans have been around for roughly 300,000 years. Do the math. That means money has existed for about 1.7% of human history. For 98.3% of our existence, humans lived without a single coin, bill, or bank account, and they weren't suffering. In fact, they were doing pretty well. This is the part that messes with your head. They had no poverty. Not because they were rich, but because the concept didn't exist. No homeless, no hungry, unless the whole group was hungry. No, I can't afford it. So how did they do it? How do you run a society without money? Before money, humans ran on something called the gift economy. Not barter, not trade, gifts. Anthropologists have studied hunter-gatherer societies for decades. The San, the Hadza, the Batek, and they found something remarkable. These societies had no markets, no prices, no debt. Instead of money, they had reciprocal altruism, which is a fancy way of saying, I share my kill with you today. And when you kill something next week, you share with me. No ledger, no interest, no you owe me. Just we're in this together. Anthropologist Marshall Sahlins called hunter-gatherers the original affluent society. Not because they had a lot, but because they wanted very little. They worked about 15 to 20 hours a week and spent the rest of their time doing what they wanted. Contrast that with your average modern human, 40 to 50 hours working plus commuting, then catching up on weekends. And here's the really uncomfortable part. They were healthier. Studies of modern hunter-gatherer groups show lower rates of heart disease, diabetes, and depression. Not because they had better doctors, but because their way of life didn't create these diseases. Now you might be thinking, but they didn't have modern technology. They died young. And yes, they didn't have antibiotics. Infant mortality was higher. Life expectancy was lower. But they also didn't have stress-related illness, loneliness epidemics, or the crushing weight of rent. So let's ask the obvious question. If life was so good without money, why did we invent it? Money wasn't invented to make life better. It was invented to make agriculture work. Around 12,000 years ago, humans started farming, and everything changed. Farming allowed us to create a surplus, extra grain, extra livestock. But surplus creates a problem. How do you trade extra wheat for extra wool? This is called the coincidence of wants problem. I have wheat, you have wool, but do we both want what the other has at the exact same time? So early societies started using a medium of exchange, something everyone agreed had value. Cowrie shells, barley, salt, copper. These were the first forms of money, scattered across different cultures. But the real game changer came in Lydia, modern-day Turkey, around 600 BCE. The Lydians minted the first standardized coins, lumps of electrum stamped with a lion's head. And with that, everything changed. You could now store value in something that didn't rot. You could carry your wealth with you. You could trade with anyone, anywhere, anytime. Money solved the barter problem so well that we forgot barter was ever a problem. Money was invented about 5,000 years ago to solve a problem that didn't exist for the previous 295,000 years, so money spread. Slowly at first, then everywhere. From Lydia to Greece, from Greece to Rome, from Rome to pretty much everywhere. And with money came something else. Debt. Debt is as old as money. The first written word wasn't poetry, it was an accounting ledger. Before money, if you borrowed something, you just gave back later. No interest, no paperwork. With money, debt became permanent. Compound interest, generational debt. And for the first time in human history, some people became permanently wealthy while others became permanently poor. This had never happened before. In hunter-gatherer societies, inequality was minimal. You couldn't hoard grain, it rotted. You couldn't hoard meat, it spoiled. But money doesn't rot. You can hoard it forever. Money created the concept of not enough. As money spread, human relationships changed. We started seeing each other differently. Instead of, who are you? We started asking, what do you have? And somewhere along the way, we forgot that money was a tool. We started treating it as the goal. So here's the uncomfortable question. Did money make us richer, or did it make us poorer in ways we don't have words for? We have more stuff than any hunter-gatherer could dream of, but we're lonelier, more anxious, and more stressed. And we're working more hours than any society in history to get there. There was another system that showed how gift economies worked at scale, It was called the Kula ring. In the Trobriand Islands, people sailed across dangerous oceans to give gifts, not to trade, but to build relationships. They gave shell necklaces and armbands to people on other islands, and those people gave something back, sometimes years later. No contract, no deadline, no what if they don't give back, just trust. And this system connected thousands of people across dozens of islands for centuries. Necklaces called solova traveled clockwise around the ring. Armbands called mwali traveled counterclockwise. Each object carried a history, every person who had ever owned it, every voyage it had survived. People risked open ocean voyages and dug out canoes to pass these gifts, not for profit, for relationship. Bronisław Malinowski, who studied them, called it the supreme system of mutual obligations, a web of trust spanning 18 islands. Your LinkedIn network with 500 connections? That's not connection. That's a phone book with photos. The Kula people didn't have many connections. They had strong ones, built over years, sometimes generations. Meanwhile, we can't even agree to return a borrowed book. But let's talk about what money actually does to your brain. Researchers found that just thinking about money makes people less likely to help a stranger. It flips a switch from social norms to market norms, from how can I help to what's in it for me. When you offer to pay a friend for doing you a favor, something breaks. The gift becomes a transaction, but offer to buy them dinner instead, and the relationship stays warm. Economists call this crowding out. Money doesn't just replace generosity, it erases it, and that's the real hidden cost of money. Not inflation, not fees, the relationships it quietly replaces. The thing is, money isn't evil. It's not good either. It's a tool. But when a tool becomes the lens through which you see everything, you've lost perspective. And that's exactly what's happened. We've monetized everything, and we feel it. We feel like something's wrong, but we can't name it. The hunter-gatherer didn't have this problem. When he had enough, he stopped. But money is infinite. There's always more. And when enough becomes never enough, that's not wealth. That's a trap. Now, this doesn't mean we should all abandon money and move into the woods. Modern medicine, the internet, indoor plumbing, space exploration, none of these exist without civilization. And civilization runs on money. The question isn't, should we have money? The question is, who's in charge, an us or it? See, the hunter-gatherers understood something we've forgotten. Wealth isn't what you have. It's what you have time to enjoy. The hunter-gatherer poverty was having few possessions. The modern poverty is having no time. Money is a tool, not a god, not a measure of worth, not a life goal. So what do we do with this? Burn our bank accounts? Move to a commune? No. But maybe we can stop treating money as the scoreboard for human worth. Maybe we can remember that before money, humans shared, cared, cooperated. And that's not a primitive instinct. It's still in you. Every time you give without expecting anything in return, you're activating a system that's 300,000 years older than money. Money made civilization possible, but community made us human. We don't need to choose one. We need to remember both. The hunter-gatherer worked 15 hours a week and had enough. Imagine what you could do with that extra time. What would you do if you didn't need to spend 40-plus hours chasing money? The point isn't to ask you to give up money. That's not realistic. The point is to ask, is money serving you, or are you serving money? Because for 98.3% of human history, the answer was obvious. Money didn't exist. And we were fine. More than fine. We thrived. Money is only 1.7% of the human story. You might have heard the phrase, time is money. But maybe time isn't money. Maybe time is what money was supposed to buy you. If you've made it this far, you might be wondering, what do I actually need? Because for 98.3% of human history, the answer was simple. Enough food, enough rest, enough connection, enough meaning, and we had all of them. So the next time you check your bank balance and feel that pang of not enough, ask yourself, is the number in this app really measuring your wealth? Or is it measuring something much smaller? Before money, we had one rule. Take only what you need. Leave some for others. That rule isn't naive. It's the rule that kept us alive for 300,000 years. Maybe it's time to start reading it again. You don't need to quit your job and live in a cave, but maybe you can ask, what's actually enough? Because for 98.3% of human history, enough was a feeling, not a number, and they had it. And they had it without a single coin. So maybe the most radical thing you can do in a world obsessed with money is to decide what enough means, and then stop. That's what the hunter-gatherers understood. And they didn't need an economics degree to get it. If this made you think differently about money, good. That's the first step. The second step is harder. It's actually living like you mean it. But the third step, that's the one that changes everything. Step 3 is stop measuring your life in dollars. Start measuring it in moments. And remember, you come from a 300,000-year line of people who knew how to share. For 295,000 years, that thread never broke. Don't be the one who drops it. Money is 5,000 years old. But you're part of a 300,000-year-old story. And that story didn't start with a coin. It started with a shared meal. And that's a kind of wealth no bank can measure. The Kula ring people understood this. The Kung understood this. The Hadza understood this. And they weren't more virtuous than us. Their system just didn't corrupt generosity. The gift was the point, not the recognition, not the return, the gift. When you give without expecting anything back, you're not being naive, you're being human. That feeling isn't an accident, it's 300,000 years of evolution rewarding you for cooperation. So the question isn't, should I give up money? The question is, what kind of world do I want to build with it? Because the story of money isn't finished. We're still writing it. And every time you share, every time you give without counting the cost, you're not being generous, you're being human. Thanks for watching. If this made you rethink what wealth actually means, that's the whole point of this channel. Subscribe for the next thing about being human that we forgot.